It's really just casual conversations that I hope to produce, talking with various people from this place we both call home, San Luis Obispo. So I'm pleased to be joined by you today, Councilmember Shoresman. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
I really love what you've done with the place, so to speak.
I love it, and it's because I love SLO. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today, too, to talk about your role here at the city and kind of how you got involved with that. I guess if you want to start, however you were inspired to get involved with public service.
Yeah, well, I have been involved with public service pretty much my entire life. I've been born and raised a public servant in some ways. Both my parents were school teachers when I was growing up. My dad taught high school science in the San Jose area for 30 years, and my mom was an elementary school teacher. So lots of teachers, got a few firefighters in the family, a few public interest attorneys, a couple of nurses. So we're just a family of servants, I think. And so it was just always instilled in me that you need to do your best to leave a place better than you found it, and that you don't get to complain if you're not willing to stand up and do something about what you care about. So that's kind of where it all began for me. And then I would say my love affair with San Luis Obispo started when I was in high school, and I had several friends that were a little bit older than me that came to school at Cal Poly and invited me down here to take a look at the place when I was starting to look at colleges. And I'll never forget, one of them took me out to MDO, to Spooner's Cove at Montaña de Oro, and it was late at night and just a million stars in the sky and the sound of the surf hitting that little stony beach there at Spooner's Cove. And I was hooked and stayed in the dorms with her on a night or two and got a chance to walk around the campus. And like I said, I was definitely hooked.
So did you always know that your trajectory was to be in public service in this area in particular, or just that you knew that you would follow the things you're passionate about and have a voice in them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my path was probably set out to do for a public service role, but I'm not sure that my exposure to San Luis Obispo was really until I came to school here. I probably would be doing something similar no matter where I ended up, but SLO is just so special and has just been such an important part of my life and the Central Coast in general. As I mentioned, Santa Barbara, traveling there. I think Santa Barbara is a pretty special place too, and I still have lots of family there. But this place is really unique. More unique than Santa Barbara. I don't know many communities that have the affection for open space that San Luis Obispo has. That is as forward thinking, no smoking ordinances when that was absolutely unheard of. So I think this place has always been at the forefront, and it's really special to be able to be a part of that on a service level.
That's wonderful. Geographically, politically, all of the things. San Martin, actually, I'm quite familiar with, and in a way, rurally kind of reminds me of like Paso or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, very, very much. It was 4 or 5 miles on the bus to get to school. Spent a lot of time riding buses, a lot different than here where most kids can walk to their neighborhood school. And I think so when I was acquiring my, knowledge about college, this place felt big to me. Morgan Hill was the nearest town to where I grew up, and it's pretty big now, but it was much smaller back then. So SLO felt big. And I have lived in bigger cities and can appreciate the big city life, but this is kind of the perfect size, I think, where you can still, you've got some of the benefits of city life, but you also can walk down the street at farmer's market or go to the grocery store and run into 4 or 5 neighbors. And I like that about it.
I agree. Time and time again, I'll tell people I love it so much. Part of it feels like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in a way. But going through then to your time at Cal Poly, what are you studying there, and are you just continually impressed by this area and knowing that you want to serve here in some capacity?
Yeah, I started out as a interior design major. Strangely, I'm not really sure where that came from, to be quite honest now. And then in my first or second quarter, I had a professor in political science for my basic government class that just hooked me and got me really interested in government work. And then I kind of moved into sort of interest in nonprofit work and did some volunteer activities with a bunch of local nonprofits. And we have a vast number of them here in SLO, which I think is a reflection of the community mindedness of the people who live here. People like to roll up their sleeves and help. And so they do that through local nonprofits. And then, my life sort of took a turn. I moved out of the area after graduation, moved up to Truckee near Lake Tahoe and lived there for a little while and worked in a bunch of different areas of the ski industry and got a position with a nonprofit organization up there called Tahoe Women's Services that was a domestic violence and sexual assault organization similar to Lumina. Here they had safe houses and rape crisis services. We met people at the hospital after incidents and had a crisis line. So many of those similar types of services. And I think it was really that job and that role that made me want to continue in my education to get my master's in public administration and really solidified my path into government and nonprofit work. So
that is incredibly important work. Wow. And then coming to here in San Luis Obispo, and myself coming from working in county government, I also wanted to make sure as part of this episode, kind of a little bit, I know it could be a broader conversation, but a little bit about how city government works, kind of your role in that and how your work, leading up to this point in Truckee and all the things, all the places, really you saw a place, like you said, having your voice heard to make changes in places. Was there something about then San Luis Obispo where you knew you wanted to fit in and enact change?
Yeah, well, as I guess I mentioned, I fell in love with this area when I was in college and knew that as I traveled north, I lived in Truckee for a little while, and then I went up to Seattle, Washington, and lived there for a couple years while I was in graduate school. But I think my heart was still here and knew that this is the place that I wanted to be long term. So when I moved back here, I started working again in nonprofits after I got my master's degree, and I worked for Big Brothers Big Sisters for about a year. And then I got my position with the county public health department, and I've been there ever since for 20 years or so. I don't think I really started getting interested in, political public service until a few years before the pandemic. I started to just really feel like voting and being a part of local decision making, in addition to working for the county and doing the important public health work that I did there, that really policy making and making decisions was much more important than I think I had realized earlier on in my career in life. And had a few people that were kind of poking me, especially as the pandemic started to close. I was working in public health. I was extremely busy during the pandemic years. And as the pandemic started to come to a close in 2021, or at least we thought it was coming to a close in 2021, some people started poking me a little bit more about, considering running for office. And just wasn't really able to think about it too much until our mayor stepped down, and that created an opening and an opportunity for the sitting council to appoint some people into the mayor's seat and potentially into a council member seat, depending on who they appointed as mayor. And so I applied for that appointment thinking, well, maybe getting on as an appointed official wouldn't be quite so intimidating as running for office as I was closing out the pandemic. And so that's what I did, and was grateful that the sitting council thought that I was a good bet to put their hopes in for replacing the mayor and then the council member that they appointed into the mayor's seat, Erica A. Stewart. And so then I ran in 2022, and here I am today. So it is. My work with public health is extremely rewarding, but I would say being a council member is one of the most, besides maybe being a mom, being a council member is probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
I can hear it in your voice that you're so passionate. And a lot of the things that you're talking about, I think one of the underlying themes is that it sounds like you love to help people. So kind of, can you tell us like how the priorities of the city are kind of laid out, and then how you have a voice in that, and then also bring other ideas to the table based off of the things that you're already passionate about?
Right. Well, I don't know how it happens in other cities, but in the city of San Luis Obispo, we have a 2-year financial planning cycle. And that is the time of the 2-year period where we really get to reevaluate what our major city goals are in the city and where we want them to go. So each financial planning process, we have one coming up at the beginning of 2025. We'll begin the 25-27 financial planning process. And there will be lots of opportunities for the public to weigh in on how we're doing with our major city goals. We have basically 4 major city goals right now, but they'll get a chance to weigh in on those goals and then provide suggestions or give input on what they think needs to be tweaked, what we might want to change, and how we should go about doing that. And the major city goals really guide where we put our funds. We as a city have certain obligations that we have to carry out, and we have to provide things like safe streets and water and sewer and trash. And we need to make sure that we have enough schools and locations where families can get to them, and commercial industry and different types of housing for different types of people and income levels to live in. So those are kind of the main things that cities have to do. But above and beyond that, and sort of interwoven with that, are our major city goals, which right now center around diversity, equity, and inclusion, housing and homelessness, cultural and economic vitality, and sustainable transportation and open space and climate action. So those are the main areas where, when we have flexibility to do things above and beyond what we're required to do, that's where we focus our funding and our priorities. That said, thankfully, a lot of those things overlap with the things that we have to do. So we can always infuse climate action and diversity, equity, inclusion in the provision of safe streets and good sanitation and healthy neighborhoods. So it's a nice nexus to have the major city goals along with knowing what we have to do as a city.
Wonderful goals. And I think the feeling that we all get from loving being here is because those things are being achieved. I think I've gotten a chance to witness many of those firsthand, as many other people do. Your role now in this kind of political sphere, is it different from somebody who works for an agency versus works on the governmental side to help to make those changes? I know people can come to, public things and have their voices heard, but your role here in this space versus working for a nonprofit, for example, it's got to be, I'm sure, a different way that things get done.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. working as an elected official is much different than working in an operational capacity as a city staff, or even in what I do in my role as a county staff person. As a policymaker, you are just that. You decide the general direction and policy framework within which the folks that are boots on the ground are implementing the policies that you have set out for the city, the general direction that you have set out. So a lot of times that gets confusing for people because I don't pick up trash. I mean, except when I'm volunteering. I don't make decisions about the hours of when our offices are going to be open. I don't make decisions about how many staff or what types of staff department heads need to hire. I oversee the funding and I approve the funding in order for them to make recommendations about what we need to do and what kind of manpower, people power we need in order to make things happen. So a lot of times we get, frustrated emails from people who are not seeing the services in the way they would like them to be seen. And while I can influence those things at a policy level, I don't directly supervise the groundskeepers at the parks. That's up to their department heads who report to the city manager. And the only people in a city, at least in our city, that the city council actually have theoretically hiring and firing power over are the city manager and the city attorney. All of the other staff report to the city manager or the city attorney, and so they are ultimately responsible for hiring the best people that they can that are good at doing what they do and the right subject matter experts to make the policies that we want to implement become a reality.
I can imagine, this being such a diverse place, diverse population, the way it's laid out geographically, and just with so many ideas, like you said, people are not always going to have the priorities of the city laid out in a way that maybe they would have liked to see it. But at the same time, do you also get to see and hear from people who are just really grateful that things come together for the greater good and see that their voice was heard, and you get to be really a catalyst of having helped make things happen for people?
Yeah, we have a pretty grateful community. I mean, I will say that it's human nature. People tend to speak up a little bit more when they're not happy about things than when they are. But we do have a fair number of people that either come to council meetings or actually more often it happens in email. People will email us and say, hey, I just rode my bike downtown and I've never felt safer. Thanks for the buffered bike lanes. Or, the street sweepers have been doing a great job in our neighborhood. Thanks for all the work that you're doing on that. Or, if there's a really good outcome in a police or fire situation, sometimes, those of our staff are seeing people a lot of times on their worst days. So it's really nice when you get a positive thanks for that. And I always, always, always make sure to share that with staff when we receive that praise. Because I think, people that work for government don't do it for the big bucks. They do it because they care about the community too. And so I want to make sure that they realize that people appreciate them as well. But it is human nature that, if you have an issue that you want resolved, that you speak up about it. And I get that. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
But it is always nice to have people weigh in when they're happy about something.
Absolutely. Well, let me just echo that. I feel super safe riding my bike here. And, there's so many of those same sentiments that I echo. Can you talk a little bit about the things that you feel passionate for? I noticed, like I see online, your work with homelessness, for example. Can you speak to that and, the things that maybe you want to see be done and why you feel so passionate to work on something like homelessness?
Yeah, well, I think that with my career in health, I like to find nexuses between public service and government and health. And nowhere is that more real in my mind as when you're creating environments that people live in and want to feel safe and healthy in. So I like to try and combine those things as much as I can. And I do, in my work with public health, work with the homeless population a fair amount. I have a program that I oversee that does street outreach. I have a nurse, a couple of nurses actually, and a behavioral health specialist that do street outreach with the homeless population. And we as a city have been a longtime supporter of SLO and some of the other homeless serving organizations that are really working hard on what is not just a San Luis Obispo or San Luis Obispo County problem, but a statewide problem of homelessness. And our housing supply just isn't there. And what we do have is too expensive for a lot of people. So, that's where my work at the county and my work as a policy maker really do overlap. And I think we're making a lot of progress. We definitely have a lot of work to do. And I don't see homelessness as being a problem that we will ever really, in quotation marks, solve. But there is a lot that we can do and a lot we need to do. And I think I'm proud of the work that we're doing as a city to make a dent in that just horrible crisis that we're all dealing with on a daily basis. And I think homelessness is one of those issues where a rising tide lifts all boats. I don't think that and I don't think that this is how it is in the city either. I don't think that people are, competitive about who gets what and where. I think generally people realize that we're all benefited by homeless people being housed. It makes us all healthier and better when we don't have people that are sleeping on street corners and in sleeping bags and don't have enough food to eat. And that impacts their ability to be healthy and therefore our whole community's ability to be healthy. So I like to look for nexuses between my work in health and public policy.
That's a really unique opportunity that you have. And like you said, it's all about making progress because a lot of these things are just really sometimes so complex when you're in a place where there are just so many people with competing ideas about how to solve something too. Is that pretty uncommon for somebody to be, in a role like yours and also working on the county side? Or it has to be to your benefit, but is that usual?
That's a great question. There have been a couple other elected officials locally who have been elected and worked at a government organization at the same time, but not very many. I think it gives me at least a unique perspective on, as a policymaker, how hard it is to actually get the work done. I think a lot of times, and we're all guilty of this, you write a letter in to a legislator or to an elected official and you want what you want and you think it should be easy to deliver. Things seem like they sound on the surface like they're easy to deliver, but oftentimes they're not as easy to deliver. And some of that is just because stuff takes a long time. And some of it is because governments need to be transparent, and transparency and communication with constituents and residents is a time-intensive process. Making sure all voices are heard is a time-intensive process. So it makes it hard to do things quickly. But I do think that it gives me that perspective when I'm sitting on the dais and somebody, staff or a constituent is proposing something. I feel like I have a little bit of insight into what it will take in order to get that particular thing to happen. So, and I think I live inside the heads of staff a little bit on some of the issues that we were talking about a few moments ago about how seldomly there are thanks distributed by the community as opposed to complaints. And I know how hard it is on staff to feel like there's mostly complaints and not a lot of praise, because they are people like me who just want to do a good job for the community. And, I am not a wastewater technician, for example. I can't tell our utilities folks how to run the water treatment facility. I can't tell them what they should be doing. I have to rely on their expertise. There's no way as a public servant I could be the expert on all the things that I need to make decisions on. So their knowledge is absolutely essential, and we need to be grateful for what they contribute.
Great point. So many people working hard to make things happen. And I think part of that, the slowness of it, is also points out the fact that it's a very, in a lot of ways, a democratic process. You get to have your voice heard. There's things like public notices, and you really have a voice in your city in many different ways. So I think that that's important for people to understand, is that it's not just because.
Yeah. Everything happens for a reason in government. And I think in the city of SLO in particular, this is a group of high performing team members who are open to out of the box thinking. And so there isn't a lot of, oh, we're doing this because this is how we've always done it, which I think can be the tendency in lots of organizations. There's a lot of willingness to look at things a different direction. And yeah, it's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, just to switch gears a little bit, because that was so insightful, getting to hear a little bit more about how the government side of things work. But having talked about how much we love this place, I always want to make sure that I ask people about kind of their favorite places and things to do in the city, in the county. Being someone that, like you said, fell in love with it at such a young age, this could be on the spot, but like, what is a perfect weekend for Michelle Shoresman in San Luis Obispo County?
Oh, wow. A perfect weekend. Well, I already mentioned Montani de Oro. That place holds a very special spot in my heart. But a perfect weekend would be probably a Saturday morning bike ride with my family. We like to ride down to Pismo or Arroyo Grande.
From here?
From here.
That's good.
Yeah. There always has to be, to make it a perfect ride, there always has to be pastries involved. So, Old West cinnamon rolls or, the Mule Bakery down in Arroyo Grande is a favorite. The House of Bread is a frequent stop on our bike rides on the way in or out of town. So bike ride, and then, probably a coffee somewhere, or, a visit to downtown. My husband and I just like to stroll around downtown and window shop and talk to people along the way. It's a pretty good time. My husband is I think a gourmet cook. So he likes to cook. So a lot of times we don't eat out too much because he likes to cook. But when we do have an opportunity, it's hard to turn down some of the places along our creek. Novo, Luna Red. There are just so many great places to hang out and have a cocktail and visit with friends. It's a lot of fun.
Make me want to go walk downtown right now.
I know.
The creek is so cool. I love that opportunity to dine on the creek.
Yes.
That's so cool to me.
Yeah. I also like to run. So I like to get a good run in. Usually that's my Sunday morning activity. And then, now that I'm on council, I spend a fair amount of time reading on the weekends. So sometimes our packets can be quite thick, and I generally try to be as informed as I can going into the meetings on Tuesday night and make sure I have plenty of time at the beginning of the week to ask questions of staff in advance and make sure I understand the issues really thoroughly before I head into the council chambers on Tuesday evening.
I love that. Last SLO related question I have is, what would be your favorite view, your vista point to look down on this great place from any one point?
Well, I have some photos on my website from Terrace Hill. probably one of the most popular places to take photos from in the city, but that is a beautiful view from that location. I'm lucky to live pretty close to it, so it's nice. And I work just up the hill from it at County Health, so it's a nice little lunchtime stroll. Second to that, I would say, at the top of the grade, there's a really great view where when on a clear day, you can see all the way out to Morro Bay. And so
when you're coming into town.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's one that if you haven't been up there, you should definitely check out.
Is that out by like West Cuesta Ridge out there?
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
I
If
love
you
that.
park at the bottom there and you can walk way out, or I don't know how far you can drive up right now, but walk out and there's some pretty good views, pretty phenomenal views. And this is such a good time of year too, because everything's so green.
Yeah. Oh, it's so green. I was there you can still drive quite a ways up West Cuesta Ridge, people taking sunset photos and things. And this may be my favorite view right here.
Yes.
It's faked. It's very faked. Those mountains don't actually situate like that. But
well, you can cut them how you want when
Yes.
you've got access to Photoshop.
Yeah. But just to really kind of wrap things up, I'd like to ask each person kind of in their role or in their interest in this county, how would you give advice to somebody who wants to get involved in what you have made a life doing?
Right. Well, there are so many opportunities in SLO and in the county to be involved. And as I mentioned before, a very, very engaged community, which I'm super grateful for. I can't imagine being on a council where nobody ever comes to your meetings and no one ever writes in. And that just seems really sad to me. So there are a number of ways. If you want to engage with the council, you can always email us. Our contact information is on the website. And I know I read every single email and I try to respond to as many of them as I can. So sometimes people are surprised when they get an email back from me, but I really do pay attention and listen and review them all and try to respond back. You can come to public comment at a meeting. At every council meeting, there is always an opportunity for you to speak on items that are on the agenda or not on the agenda. And the opportunity to speak on items that are not on the agenda is always at the beginning of the meeting. So you can come in, have your 3 minutes to talk about whatever it is that's important to you, and you can turn around and walk out the door and not listen to the rest of the meeting. So that's important to know. But we also have so many different ways to engage with the city. We have a large number of advisory bodies that are our council's opportunity to engage community members and subject matter experts on different issues. We have a committee for pretty much everything. We have a tree committee. We have a cultural heritage committee. We have a planning commission. Most jurisdictions have a planning commission that help us make decisions about buildings and what should go where and zoning and things like that. We have a Parks and Rec commission. So if, utilizing our parks is right up your alley, then that's the commission for you. And then we also have Engage SLO, which is a relatively new volunteer portal that I believe you are pretty familiar with. It has sort of canned, easy volunteer opportunities. If you just want to go out and pick up trash at a park one day, you can do that. Or if you want to volunteer in one of our city offices, maybe you have some administrative skills and you're willing to help with filing or answering phones, you can do that kind of thing as well. Or you can go do trail maintenance with our rangers on a one-off opportunity here and there. So we hired a volunteer coordinator probably not quite a year ago, and she has done a great job of really expanding opportunities for people to do long-term volunteer things or just one-off things here and there. So yeah, Engage SLO.
Amazing. Well, thank you for also contributing greatly to making this community what it is, and for sharing a little bit about yourself and your journey here on the SLO Lounge. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. It's been fun.
Yeah, come back anytime, and we'll see you downtown.
Yeah, we'll see you downtown.